A blood-stained apron. No witnesses. One lie too many. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Type in the comments. Where are you watching from tonight? I truly enjoy reading every single one. I don't normally take breakfast at 11:15, but I made an exception that Tuesday morning on account of three things. The eggs were coddled just right. The corned beef hash came from a batch I had personally approved, and there wasn't a single person in the brownstone yelling or bleeding. That changed, 2 out of 3 anyway, when Fritz brought in a man wearing a canvas apron with a blood stain the size of a maple leaf dead center. The man was 30-ish, lean and wide-eyed, like a sous chef who just burned the foie gras in front of the food critic from Gourmet Monthly. His shoes were non-slip black, standard issue for anyone who deals with sharp objects and hot oil. His hands shook slightly as he clutched the apron like it was Exhibit A in a trial he wasn't sure he wanted to win. "Mr. Goodwin," Fritz said, his expression folding into displeasure like an unbuttered crepe. He insisted. I got up, wiped my mouth with a cloth napkin Wolfe insists on even when we're not expecting company, and gestured to the red blotch. "That yours?" "No," he said, which I found interesting. I run deliveries for Chef Victor Latanzio. This came in with our morning return stock. And you brought it here because—" He looked around like he was hoping someone would shout, "Surprise!" and hand him a cocktail. "Because he said if anything odd ever happened, anything that looked bad, I was to come straight to Mr. Nero Wolfe. He said Mr. Wolfe once solved something for his brother, something private." That rang no bells, but then again, Wolfe has solved things for more people than he remembers, especially if they were discreet, paid well, and didn't talk too much. "I'm Archie Goodwin," I said, his right hand, left eye, and all 4 feet. "What's your name?" "Reggie Corso," he said. "I've been with Latanzio's for 3 years. I'm not a cook, I'm delivery and prep. I found this in a linen return bin this morning. We send out fresh aprons daily. This one came back covered in blood." "Animal blood?" I asked. "I worked in a butcher shop before this. That's not pork or beef. And it's too much for a nicked finger." That got my full attention. I've seen plenty of blood. When it's this fresh, this red, and you can tell it came from someone who didn't walk away whistling, you don't ignore it. "Did you call the police?" I asked. He stiffened. "No, sir. If I did and it turns out to be nothing, I'm out of a job. Chef Latanzio doesn't like drama." I gave him a once-over and decided he wasn't stupid, just scared. Still, bringing a bloody apron into Nero Wolfe's house was like dropping a live lobster on a silk pillow. It wasn't going to win you any points, no matter how politely you did it. "I'll take it up to Mr. Wolfe," I said. "You can wait downstairs with Fritz. Don't touch anything that smells expensive." He looked like he might faint from relief. "Thank you." I carried the apron upstairs to the office. Wolfe was in his chair, of course, reading Le Monde, pretending there wasn't a world beyond the orchids upstairs and the beer downstairs. I didn't say a word. I just laid the apron on the corner of his desk, careful to avoid the blood stain touching anything. Wolfe looked up, looked at the apron, and did something rare. He frowned. "I trust," he said. "That is not your idea of a practical joke." "Hardly. It was hand-delivered by a man who works for Victor Latanzio. Apparently it came back in the morning linen returns. Nobody knows whose it is." He set his newspaper down precisely, his fingertips grazing the edge of the stain like he was playing a scale on a grand piano. "I don't suppose Mr. Latanzio included a note." "No note. Just a nervous delivery man with a conscience and an apron with enough blood to raise questions." "Fetch me a glass of beer, then call Mr. Latanzio. Invite him here, discreetly." "Why take the case?" "I haven't. Not yet." He gazed at the blood as if calculating something. "But someone has already bled. The apron is proof, and if the answer is subtle enough to come in linen, not leather, I'm at least interested." which, from Wolfe, was the equivalent of a standing ovation. It took exactly 17 minutes for Victor Lattanzio to show up. That's not an estimate. I timed it. I made the call from Wolfe's office, where he was still eyeing the bloody apron like it had offended him personally. Lattanzio didn't ask questions. He didn't protest or stall. He said, "I'm on my way," and hung up. For a man whose food critics called him methodical, that was practically a scream. By the time he arrived, Fritz had whisked Reggie Corso into the kitchen under the pretense of coffee and company. Fritz doesn't like nervous people near the flatware. I opened the door and there he was. Victor Lattanzio, looking less like a celebrity chef and more like a man who had just come from identifying a body. He was tall, early 50s, with black and silver hair combed back as if each strand answered to a general. His coat was perfectly cut, his shoes spotless. The only flaw was a twitch in his left eyelid. He didn't speak until he was in the front room. "Where is it?" I gestured up the stairs. "Nero Wolfe's office. He's waiting. You'll leave your coat here." He did, without fuss, which told me how rattled he was. Normally, chefs with reputations don't like being summoned, even less so by a man who hasn't left his house since Eisenhower was in office. Lattanzio followed me upstairs in silence, and I ushered him in. Wolfe didn't stand. Of course he didn't. But he did incline, his head, which for him is what passes as rolling out the red carpet. "Mr. Lattanzio, be seated." Lattanzio took the red chair across from Wolfe's desk and nodded politely, though his eyes were on the apron, still draped across the blotter. "You recognize it?" Wolfe asked. "Yes. Our standard delivery apron, white cotton canvas, reinforced seams. We use 24 per day." "And the stain?" Lattanzio didn't flinch. "Blood. It's not from our kitchen. I have standing protocol. Any apron with more than a drop of animal blood is disposed of. My staff are meticulous." Wolfe nodded, then gestured at me without looking. "Mr. Goodwin?" I stepped forward. "Reggie Corso brought it in. He said it came back with this morning's linen returns. No one at the restaurant has claimed it." Lattanzio exhaled slowly, then looked at Wolfe. "My brother Silvio spoke of you once. You helped him 10 years ago. A private matter involving a wine shipment and a threatened lawsuit. He trusted you." "A discreet affair," Wolfe said. "Unlike this. I didn't want to bring it to the police yet." "Why not?" Lattanzio hesitated. "Because if someone in my kitchen is involved in something like this, the damage would be irreversible. We have a Michelin inspection scheduled in 2 weeks. I can't afford scandal over an unexplained apron." "Someone bled," Wolfe said. "That is more than a scandal. It's potentially a crime." "I understand. That's why I'm here." Wolfe leaned back slightly. "Describe the process by which this item was returned." Lattanzio straightened his cuffs. "Every night, all aprons, towels, and linens are collected, sorted, and placed into designated return hampers. The bins are locked, tagged, and picked up at 6 a.m. sharp by artisan laundry services. This apron returned in a sealed hamper marked from our pastry station." "But it doesn't belong to pastry?" The pastry station wears chocolate brown aprons, always." This came from the main line. "And no one noticed at pickup?" "They wouldn't. The hampers are closed. We don't inspect the contents again until they return." Wolfe frowned. "Then the apron was concealed intentionally." "Possibly. Was there an incident in your kitchen recently? An injury, an argument, a disappearance?" Lattanzio hesitated. "No one has gone missing, but we did have a health inspection last Friday. Routine. It passed with 2 minor notes. One of the newer line cooks, a young woman named Kendra Hale, didn't show up Saturday morning. She called in sick, said it was a stomach bug." "That was how many days ago?" 4. Wolfe gave me a glance. "Mr. Goodwin, you will make inquiries. Begin with Miss Hale. Got it. Latanzio stood. I'll cooperate fully, but I need discretion. If word of this gets out— Yes, Wolfe cut in. Your souffle deflates. That wasn't entirely fair, but I let it pass. Latanzio gave me his business card, a heavy cream rectangle embossed with his name, the restaurant's name, Latanzio, and a phone number I already knew. He left without shaking hands, and Wolfe turned to me once the door closed. I want you to visit the restaurant, he said. Do not announce yourself unless you must. Observe the kitchen, the staff. Speak to this young woman if possible. And if she's still out sick, then speak to someone who isn't. I want a sense of the atmosphere. Find out who knew about the return bin, who had access, and who might benefit from a concealed apron soaked in human blood. I nodded. You think it's more than a prank? I think, Wolfe said, that it is an act of either desperation or design. In either case, we must learn what it conceals. I left the brownstone by noon, heading south toward Soho, where Latanzio occupied a spot so exclusive that reservations were made 2 months out and confirmed twice to prevent faint-hearted diners from forfeiting their table to the next oligarch in line. I didn't make it to the hostess stand before I was intercepted by a man who looked like he'd been carved out of mahogany and trained in hostage negotiations. He introduced himself as Roland, the floor manager, and tried to direct me toward the sidewalk with one practiced palm. I showed him my license, Nero Wolfe's name on it, stamped official. That deflated him just enough. I said, I'm not here for the duck confit. I'm here to ask about Kendra Hale. That earned me a pause. She's out sick, he said. Flu, maybe. She hasn't been in since last week. Did she leave early? She clocked out Friday at midnight. Nothing unusual. Anyone see her leave? Her roommate works pastry. She left with her. Why? I'm not at liberty to say. Do you have an address? Roland pursed his lips. She lives in Williamsburg. I don't know the street. I slipped him a 20. He sighed, went behind the hostess stand, and scribbled something on a slip of paper. This stays between us. Of course, I said. I'm a vault with eyes. He went back to seating a table of tech types who didn't know which fork to use, and I slipped out before they noticed the guy who'd walked in without a reservation. I crossed the East River and made it to the Williamsburg address by 2:30. It was a walk-up, 3 stories, flower pots in the windows, 1 cracked pane on the top floor. I rang the buzzer for 3B. No answer. I rang again. Still nothing. I looked up and saw a curtain flutter, just a twitch, enough to tell me someone was home. I pressed the buzzer one more time. Kendra Hale, I called. I'm not a cop. I work for Nero Wolfe. I need to ask you about an apron. There was a long silence, then a voice from the intercom. Go away. Not yet, I said. You know why I'm here. If you're in trouble, now's the time to get ahead of it. A pause. Then, I didn't mean to. I swear, I just wanted to scare him. My gut went cold. Him who? I asked. But the intercom clicked off, and upstairs I heard a lock turn, not the sound of someone letting me in, the sound of someone barricading herself in. I turned back toward the street, already dialing the brownstone. Wolfe picked up on the 3rd ring. She's alive, I said. Scared, shaking, and definitely involved. She said she wanted to scare him. I don't know who he is yet. Wolfe didn't respond for a moment, then return immediately. I must consider the next step. I hung up, looked once more at the window with the fluttering curtain, and headed back toward the city. Whatever this was, it was no longer about blood on canvas. It was about fear, and someone who wanted it seen. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Fritz was plating something with saffron and secrets in the kitchen, and Wolfe was in his chair exactly as I'd left him, only his eyes were closed, which meant he was either thinking or pretending not to be annoyed that I hadn't returned faster. I didn't ask which. I stepped inside, dropped my coat on the rack, and went straight to the office. He opened one eye and looked at me as if he had already deduced the angle of my stride and the thickness of the mud on my soles. "She's alive," I said, "but she's not all right. Kendra Hale is hiding behind a locked door in a third-story walk-up in Williamsburg, and she said, and I quote, 'I didn't mean to. I just wanted to scare him.' Then she cut the intercom and turned the bolt." Wolfe didn't move, but his nostrils flared slightly. That, for him, is the equivalent of throwing a chair. "So," he said, "she admits to a design and claims regret. That confirms our premise." "Which is?" "That the apron was planted." I nodded and took the red chair. "Planted where someone would find it. Enough blood to set off alarm bells, but not enough to draw a chalk outline." "Precisely," he said. "And its placement in the pastry hamper was not casual. It required knowledge of our client's system." "And of his staff," I added. "She said she wanted to scare him. That rules out a random target." "Yes," Wolfe said, steepling his fingers. "The next question is, who is him?" "She didn't say." "Then we must suppose he is someone with power over her, real or perceived. In the absence of an identified corpse, and in light of your observation that she's alive and fearful, we can tentatively eliminate murder." "I didn't see any cuts, bruises, or other signs through the window," I said. "She looked intact, but panicked." "That suggests coercion, or guilt, or both." Wolfe allowed himself a small grunt. "You will speak with Saul Panzer. I want Miss Hale observed, discreetly." "I'll call him now." I went to the phone and dialed Saul's private line. He picked up on the second ring, he always does, and I filled him in with the key points: a blood-stained apron, a missing pastry cook, and a locked apartment with more secrets than cutlery. He agreed to start surveillance at dusk. When I returned to the office, Wolfe was staring at the apron again. He hadn't moved it, but I could tell he was imagining it. Not as an object, but as a question. That's how his mind worked. You looked at something and saw what it was. He looked at it and saw what it meant. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "we will require additional context. The environment in which this incident occurred may supply more than its participants do. I want to know the temper of the kitchen. Who commands respect? Who inspires fear? Who is tolerated out of convenience? You want me to infiltrate the kitchen? I want you to observe it, as a patron, dine, watch, speak when spoken to. I can get a table? You'll have one tonight. I instructed Mr. Lattanzio this morning to hold one for you. He assumed it was precautionary. Now it is essential." I raised a brow. "You assumed I'd be dining undercover before we had a name." "I assumed the blood was not from a chicken, and you will take care with your wardrobe. No charcoal suit. Wear the indigo one. You blend better when you look like a hedge fund manager." By 7:30, I was seated alone at a two-top near the edge of Lattanzio's open kitchen. The restaurant was half theatrical, half military. Cooks moved like they were timed, and every plate passed inspection under heat lamps that could spotlight a lie from 50 feet. The food was exceptional. I started with a citrus-cured halibut that melted like a confession, then moved to a duck confit that I suspected could cause temporary amnesia. But I wasn't there for dinner. I was watching the floor. Specifically, I was watching a woman named Dahlia Trent, the pastry chef. She was lean, exact, and wore her white coat like it had been tailored for a military tribunal. Every movement was crisp, and her staff followed her instructions the way soldiers follow flares. At one point, she conferred with a sous chef, a tall man with a scar on his forearm and a grin like a paper cut. They exchanged low words over a sheet pan of something caramelized, and then he turned and glanced toward the service entrance. Just a glance, but enough for me to know he was hiding something. After dessert, hazelnut mousse with a candied blood orange slice, irony noted. I asked to speak with the manager. Roland. He arrived promptly, smoothing his tie and frowning politely. "Something wrong with the meal?" "No," I said. "It was perfect. But I have a question I was told you could answer." "Of course." "Tell me about Dahlia Trent." He blinked. "Pastry chef. 5 years. Used to run a bakery in Portland. Brilliant. Not warm. Who's her second in command?" He hesitated. "Guy named Jonah Fell. Been with us 6 months. Technically a floater, but she pulled him into her section full-time. Why? She trusts him." "Should she?" Roland's jaw worked for a second. "That's not for me to say." "Sure it is." He looked around and leaned in. "He's sharp. Knows his sugars. Handles tempering like a surgeon. But he's got a temper. Dahlia can keep him in check mostly. But there have been incidents." "What kind?" "Nothing formal. Raised voices. A broken ramekin or two. Tension." "Between him and her?" Roland hesitated. "Once. Mostly others. One of the younger cooks, Kendra. She had a run-in with him last week. I had to pull her offline. She looked pale." "Did she say anything?" "Not to me, but she didn't come in the next day." I thanked him and left. On the walk back to the brownstone, I called Saul. "She's still in there," he said. "Lights on, shades drawn, no movement past the window since sunset. She's not expecting company. She had a confrontation with a guy named Jonah Fell. Pastry section. You want to guess who he is?" Saul grunted. "You want me to have a chat with him?" "Not yet, but keep an eye out. I think we're getting closer to what scared her." Back in the office, Wolfe was waiting. "She feared reprisal," he said when I finished reporting, "and planted the apron in Jonah Fell's section. A warning, one that wouldn't be traced directly." "But why blood?" I asked. "If she just wanted to scare him, why not a threat note? Or a broken plate?" "Because notes can be traced. Plates ignored. Blood is primal. It cannot be ignored, and it invites suspicion without immediately confirming guilt. Unless she cut someone to make it." "She didn't," Wolfe said calmly. "You said she was uninjured, and there has been no report of injury from the kitchen staff." I paused. "So where did the blood come from?" "That, Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said, "is our next task. Find the source of the blood, and you will find the fulcrum of the motive." And just like that, the apron wasn't the mystery anymore. It was the message. When Wolfe tells you to find the source of a blood stain, he doesn't mean by playing CSI with a microscope and pipette. He means go out into the wild and ask the right people the wrong questions until someone twitches hard enough to become a suspect. By 9 the next morning, Saul had updated me. Kendra Hale hadn't left her apartment, hadn't taken delivery, hadn't even opened a window. She was either stewing in fear or trying to get her story straight. My money was on both. I started my day with a visit to a less glamorous part of the restaurant industry, the linen service. Artisan laundry services operated out of a squat concrete building near the Brooklyn waterfront, where the air smelled like detergent, rust, and occasional despair. It wasn't the sort of place where someone would recognize a monogrammed apron, but if the blood came through them, I needed to know if it had been noticed or scrubbed. A manager named Patrice met me on the floor. She had forearms like a boxer and a voice like a blender on low speed. She wasn't unfriendly, but she didn't appreciate being questioned by someone in polished shoes who wasn't here to pick up soiled napkins. I showed her a printed photo of the apron. "This come through your system?" She frowned. "Yeah, Latanzio's. Last Monday. Came back with a flagged note. Contaminated item. Isolate for review." "What kind of contamination?" She rolled her eyes. "Blood. We see a lot. But this one was flagged because of the quantity and because it wasn't animal blood as far as we could tell." I leaned forward. "Why not?" "Color, viscosity. You get a feel. Chicken blood's thin. This was thick, dark. We don't test it, we're not cops." But it raised eyebrows. "Who made the note?" She flipped through a clipboard. Simone, third shift. She's off today. I filed that for later. What happens to flagged items? We log them, isolate them in quarantine bins, and notify the client. Did you notify Latanzio's? Patrice shook her head. Number Reggie Corso came in personally, asked if we'd had any odd returns. Said something about a training audit. I showed him the item. He took it, said it wouldn't happen again. So Reggie had seen the apron before he brought it to us. And he hadn't mentioned that. Either he was smoothing things over, or he'd been told to downplay it. I thanked Patrice, left her with a crisp 20 for her trouble, and drove to Reggie's apartment in Park Slope, a third-floor walk-up with bikes chained to the stoop and the faint smell of last night's Thai food in the hallway. He answered the door in jeans and a T-shirt, looking both surprised and guilty. A bad poker face, especially for someone holding cards. Mr. Goodwin, did something happen? That depends, I said, on whether you lied to me. You found the apron at the laundry, didn't you? He blinked. Yes, I didn't know what else to do. You said it came back in the morning returns. It did. That's where I went to find it. I asked Patrice if anything had been flagged. Why lie? Because I panicked. I thought if I told you I took it from the laundry directly, you'd think I tampered with it. That wasn't nothing, but it wasn't quite everything either. You know Jonah Fell? I asked. His eyes narrowed. Yeah, why? Kendra Hale doesn't like him much. She's not saying why. You want to fill in the blank? Reggie hesitated. He's intense. Keeps to himself, but when he talks, it's always like he's measuring you. Last month I saw him follow Kendra out after shift. She didn't look happy about it. She ever say anything to you? Number, but I saw her crying in the break room the next morning. That was enough for me. Not proof, not even solid accusation, but plenty of smoke to justify looking for the fire. I left Reggie with a warning about withholding details from Wolfe, something between a scolding and a sermon, and headed back toward Latanzio's. I wasn't planning to waltz into the kitchen again, but I did need a word with someone who might know Jonah's story. I found that someone in the alley behind the restaurant on a smoke break. A line cook named Derek. Young, lean, with grease on his apron and suspicion in his eyes. Jonah Fell, I said casually. What's his deal? Derek blew out a stream of smoke. He's got hands, I'll give him that. Knows his way around sugar like it's genetic. But there's something off. Never talks unless he's correcting you. Watches everyone. Real still, like a hawk with a knife. Ever see him get into it with Kendra? Once. She was plating a tart wrong. He flipped out, quiet but sharp, told her she'd ruin the whole tray if she didn't fix her clumsy fingers. She didn't even argue. Just froze. Any chance he'd hurt her? Derek didn't answer right away. He's the type that could. Wouldn't shout, wouldn't swing. But he'd make you want to disappear. That was the second person suggesting Jonah Fell was dangerous, and maybe not just in the kitchen. I returned to the brownstone by early afternoon. Wolfe was at his desk, hands tented, frown etched in stone. Report, he said. I gave him the rundown. The laundry manager confirming the Blood's oddity, Reggie's revised story, Kendra's emotional fallout, and the general staff consensus that Jonah Fell gave off enough menace to power a small town. When I finished, Wolfe remained silent for a long moment. I am displeased with Mr. Corso, he said. His instinct was to withhold, and while it may not be criminal, it is inconvenient. He was scared, I said, and protective. Of whom? That's the question, isn't it? Wolfe nodded. The provenance of the blood remains unresolved, but we are closer. Miss Hale's fear and Mr. Fell's temperament suggest conflict, possibly coercion. If she wished to scare him, as she said, then the apron was theatrical, a warning cloaked as evidence. And if she used real blood, I said, Then she either got it from someone or something. Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction wider. Precisely. Mr. Goodwin, you will speak with Dr. Trammell. The vet? Indeed, he services several upscale restaurants who require rapid inspection of specialty meats. He is discreet and precise. Inquire whether he has supplied blood recently to anyone at Lattanzio. I made the call. Dr. Trammell picked up after one ring. Either he owed Wolfe something or just enjoyed strange questions. When I asked, he didn't laugh or stole. Yes, he said. Last week, Miss Hale requested a small quantity of animal blood. Said it was for a dramatic chocolate display. Some Halloween-themed thing for a pop-up. She said that. Yes, I found it unusual, but not illegal. She paid in cash. How much blood? A pint. Sealed, I thanked him and hung up. She staged it, I said. The blood, the apron, the return, it was all premeditated. Wolfe exhaled, slowly. Then the question becomes, did it work? You mean, did it scare him? Did it stop him? That I didn't know. But I had a feeling the next time I saw Jonah Fell, I'd be closer to the answer. And if Kendra Hale was playing with fire, she'd done it by pouring blood into the kindling. It wasn't quite dusk when I parked outside Kendra Hale's apartment again, but the shadows in the hallway felt longer. Saul had been camped out across the street in a borrowed delivery van with tinted windows, a thermos of black coffee, and that patient, predatory look he gets when a mystery starts to twitch. She hasn't left since I started watching, he said as I approached the van. No deliveries, no guests. Curtains still drawn. A real hermit routine. She's playing scared, I said. But she's already made one move. The apron wasn't a breakdown, it was strategy. Saul didn't argue. He rarely does unless it's important. I crossed the street, climbed the narrow stairs, and rapped on 3B. No answer. Kendra, I called. It's Archie Goodwin. You remember me? I'm the one who asked about the bloody apron you left like a calling card. Silence. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to stop this before someone gets hurt for real. More silence. I waited another beat. Then, just as I started to turn away, I heard the lock turn. The door creaked open 2 inches. You're alone? Yes, I said, though Saul's across the street in case I fall down the stairs dramatically. The door opened a little farther. She was pale, in a faded t-shirt and leggings, hair pulled back in a messy bun. The same fear lingered in her eyes, but there was something else now. Calculation. You shouldn't be here, she said. Maybe not. But here we are. Can I come in? She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was neat, small, smelled like herbal tea and something burned a day or 2 ago. She sat on the edge of the couch, knees together, hands clutched. You figured it out, didn't you? She asked. Parts. You asked for animal blood from a vet Wolfe knows. You soaked an apron in it. You planted it in a return bin tagged for someone else's station. You wanted someone to find it and panic. She swallowed. I didn't think it would go that far. Why'd you do it, Kendra? She stared at her hands. Because I couldn't take it anymore. Jonah, he has this way of making you feel like you're the one who's broken. Like you're the problem. And if you push back, he pushes harder, but not physically. Not where anyone can see. What did he do? He started with little things, criticizing my work in front of the others, making comments about my posture, my hands. Then one night he followed me to the subway. Said he just wanted to talk, but he stood too close. Told me I owed him respect, that I needed to understand who I was working under. And you didn't report it? She laughed, short and bitter. To who? Lattanzio. He only sees results. Dahlia? She'd say Jonah was just intense. And HR? Please, restaurants don't have real HR. I tried to quit once, but I need the job. The insurance. So you staged the apron as what? A warning? She nodded. I figured if he thought someone was onto him, if he thought there was blood involved, real danger, he might back off. That's a dangerous gamble. It was safer than the alternatives. I didn't argue. I'd seen men like Jonah before, the kind who knew how to hover just on the right side of consequences. Wolfe had a term for them: cowards with methods. And if someone reported it to the police? I asked. I was banking on discretion. That's why I had Reggie take it to Mr. Wolfe instead. Reggie knew. She hesitated. Not everything. Just enough. He's been kind to me. That tracked. Reggie Corso wasn't the villain in this story, but he wasn't completely in the dark either. All right, I said. Here's the bad news. You staged evidence. You tampered with laundry. You made a situation look like a crime when it wasn't. Her face crumpled. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I know, but someone else might not stop where you did. I left her with a warning and a promise. Wolfe wouldn't turn her in, but neither would he leave the situation to fester. If she had any more clever ideas, she was to forget them immediately. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was mid-orchid when I gave him the full account. He didn't interrupt until I got to the part where Kendra explained Jonah's behavior. Ah, he said softly. So it is not guilt that plagues her. It is entrapment. She thought fear would buy her distance. It may have. But it also revealed her desperation. That will interest Mr. Fell. You think he suspects? I think, Wolfe said, settling into his chair, that Mr. Fell is not a man easily deceived, and that Miss Hale has now made herself visible. That is dangerous. Then we pull her out. Number that would spook him. We proceed. Tactically. That's when Wolfe made the call to Saul. The message was simple. Keep watching, but also get closer. We wanted to know if Jonah was preparing to retaliate, confess, or disappear. The next morning, Wolfe summoned Victor Lattanzio. The chef arrived at 10, gloved in irritation and scented with espresso. Wolfe wasted no time. Mr. Lattanzio, your kitchen harbors a liability. Jonah Fell. Lattanzio frowned. He's competent, sharp. He's also volatile. Miss Hale has accused him, privately, of intimidation. Victor's expression didn't change much, but his shoulders tightened. Do you have proof? I have a credible testimony, a pattern of behavior, and an apron soaked in staged blood, planted out of desperation. Lattanzio was silent for a moment, then, she did that. She did. He exhaled through his nose. I've had rumors, nothing actionable. Dahlia says he's intense but loyal. Loyal to whom? To her. To his station. Not to me, I'll admit. Then you will suspend him, Wolfe said calmly. Lattanzio blinked. Without proof? Wolfe's tone cooled a degree. If you wait for proof, you may invite escalation. Miss Hale attempted to frighten Mr. Fell. You may prevent the need for her next attempt. There was a long silence. Then Lattanzio nodded. I'll handle it quietly. He left without another word. That afternoon, Saul called. He's packing. Fell? I asked. Yep. Duffel bag, fast hands. No panic, but no delay either. Does he know he's about to be suspended? Not unless Lattanzio tipped him off already. Wolfe, when I relayed this, was serene. He is anticipating exposure, Wolfe said. Not guilt. He believes Miss Hale has informed someone. He's running. No, Wolfe said. He is repositioning. He'll stay in New York. He has no reason to flee unless we force it. So what's the move? Wolfe tapped the blotter. We flush him. You will invite Mr. Fell here. Tell him Miss Hale is reconsidering her silence. You want to provoke him? Number Y want to observe him, in my chair, on my terms. That night I made the call. Jonah Fell answered on the second ring. I'm Archie Goodwin, I said. I work for Nero Wolfe. I believe you've heard of him. A pause. I have. We'd like a word. Another pause. Then, when? Tomorrow, 11 sharp. I'll be there. He hung up without asking why. The spider had been warned, and now it was walking into the web. The next morning, Wolfe had Fritz serve a heartier breakfast than usual. Oatmeal with a hint of nutmeg, toast grilled just shy of caramel, and eggs poached to an internal philosophy Wolfe insisted upon but would never describe. I didn't ask why the indulgence. When Nero Wolfe eats well before a meeting, it usually means he expects a bad taste in his mouth afterward. At 10:56 a.m., Jonah Fell arrived. He was punctual, composed, and dressed like a pastry chef who owned more knives than socks. His coat was pristine. His eyes were unreadable. I opened the door and gave him my friendliest deadpan. "Mr. Fell, welcome to the brownstone. I'm Archie Goodwin." He nodded once. "You said Mr. Wolfe wanted a word." "Several, if he's in the mood. This way." I led him upstairs. Wolfe was already seated, of course, in his yellow chair, hands steepled on his belly. The room smelled faintly of the orchid house. He'd left the door cracked, something he only did when he wanted a lingering sense of superiority in the air. Jonah stepped into the office with the cautious grace of someone used to control. Wolfe gestured to the red chair. Jonah sat without being asked twice. "Mr. Fell," Wolfe began, "this meeting is informal. You are not accused of anything. You are not under obligation, but you are a subject of interest." "That's vague," Jonah said, his voice smooth and faintly dry. "It is," Wolfe agreed. "Intentionally." I took my place behind Jonah and to the side. It wasn't quite intimidation, but it wasn't friendly either. Wolfe doesn't believe in badgering. He believes in stillness. Stillness unsettles people more effectively than shouting. "You have been in the pastry station at Latanzio for 6 months, Wolfe said. "Hand-selected by Miss Trent?" "Yes." "You are skilled, intelligent. You know your station thoroughly." "I do." "And you are feared." Jonah blinked just once. "Feared?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "Not by the patrons. Not by Mr. Latanzio, but by your peers, Miss Hale in particular." Jonah gave a small smile. "Kendra is sensitive." "No," Wolfe said. "She's frightened." Jonah shrugged. "Then she should leave." "She tried," Wolfe said mildly. "But you dissuaded her. A conversation at a subway entrance, a few well-placed remarks, an insinuation of consequences. Is that your method, Mr. Fell? Calculated dominance?" Jonah didn't answer. I moved forward. "We know about the apron," I said. "The one she planted. Soaked in animal blood. Put into your section's return. She wanted you to believe someone new." "That was amateur," Jonah said. Wolfe's brow arched slightly. "So you knew it was her?" "I suspected. And yet you did not retaliate." "I don't need to retaliate. She's unstable. She'll sink herself eventually." "No," Wolfe said calmly. "You expected silence. You depend on it. But this time she acted. She signaled distress. In the only language you'd understand. Fear." Jonah stood abruptly. "Is this an interrogation?" "No," Wolfe said. "This is a diagnosis. You are a malignant presence in a closed environment. You operate by pressure, not violence. But pressure kills, Mr. Fell. Slowly, quietly." Jonah's eyes flicked to me, then back to Wolfe. "Are you accusing me of something actionable?" "Not yet," Wolfe said. "But you have been suspended. That is not speculation." Jonah didn't flinch. He adjusted his cuff. "So this is a warning?" "No," Wolfe said. "This is a wedge. Your position is compromised. Your advantage, silence, is lost. You may take the hint, or stay and escalate. If you choose the latter, understand this. The next item returned in the laundry may not be theater." Jonah stood still for a moment, calculating. Then he gave Wolfe a faint nod. "Good day, gentlemen." He left without another word. The door closed behind him. I looked at Wolfe. "You think that rattled him?" "No," Wolfe said. "But it marked him. That will have to do." "You think he'll go quietly?" "No," Wolfe repeated. "He's too proud. But he will not act directly. Men like Mr. Fell act only when they believe the world has blinked first." Which meant we needed to keep our eyes wide open. That night, Saul reported that Jonah hadn't gone home. He'd been seen at a wine bar in Chelsea meeting with Dahlia Trent. They sat in a corner, heads bent close. Dahlia looked angry. Jonah looked confident. They parted on tense terms. The next morning, Wolfe had me bring Dahlia in. She arrived at 11, still in her whites, apron folded neatly in a tote bag. She had the air of someone used to being summoned, but not used to being questioned. Her eyes, cool and sharp, scanned the office as she sat. "You asked for me," she said, voice clipped. "Yes," Wolfe said. "We've spoken with Mr. Fell." She said nothing. "He's dangerous," Wolfe continued. "Not because of what he has done, but because of what he believes he is entitled to do." Dahlia didn't blink. "He's efficient, focused, brilliant, and arrogant, dismissive, controlling. You've described every great chef I've ever met." "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "But most do not instill fear in their subordinates. Miss Hale fears him." Dahlia looked away for the first time. "Kendra is fragile. She's gifted, but easily shaken." "Did you know she planted the apron?" "I suspected. She's been jumpy. Reggie covers for her." Wolfe inclined his head. "And do you believe her fear is unfounded?" Dahlia was silent. "Then, no. Then why protect him?" She flinched just slightly. "Because he's the only one who's never failed a dessert window in 2 years. Because I'm building a team, not running a counseling center. Because he delivers." "And what has that delivery cost?" Wolfe asked. Her jaw tensed. "You wouldn't understand." "No," Wolfe said softly. "But you do, and you will have to choose. Protect him or protect the kitchen. The latter, I think, will survive. The former, perhaps not." She stood. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" "Neglect," Wolfe said, "and cowardice." She left in silence. That night, Saul called again. "Kendra got a package," he said. "No label, hand-delivered." "What kind of package?" "Flat, envelope, maybe documents." "Did she open it?" "Not that I saw." "Keep watching," I said. "This may be Jonah's next move." But it wasn't, because 30 minutes later, Kendra left the apartment. First time in days. She headed uptown, alone. Saul followed her to a building in Hell's Kitchen, an art supply store. She bought a sketchbook, a fine-tipped black pen, and a tube of red watercolor. When she got home, she shut the blinds again. I called Wolfe. "She's preparing something," I said. "Yes," he murmured. Another message. "To Jonah. Or to us." Wolfe's tone had that slight shift, that tiny inflection that told me he was no longer annoyed. He was interested. "She's done playing defense," he said. "She's drawing blood, one way or another." And the game had entered its final act. The next morning, I found Wolfe already at his desk, reading the New York Times with the sort of rigid serenity that usually precedes a storm. Fritz had brought in the coffee, left the room in silence, and I knew better than to speak until Wolfe had finished both the article and his thoughts about it. When he finally folded the paper with military precision and set it aside, he looked up. "She's baiting him," he said without preamble. "You mean Kendra?" "Of course. The envelope, the art supplies, the movement after days of hiding, all calculated." "Any idea what the bait is supposed to catch?" He gave me a glance. "What do all traps intend to catch?" "The one thing clever enough not to get caught." "Jonah," he nodded. Her last warning didn't work. So now she escalates. Seems risky. She believes the alternative is worse. He gestured toward the blotter. Have Saul continue surveillance. We must be prepared for either outcome, an attack or a confession, possibly both. I made the call. Saul, still parked outside her building like a particularly stubborn ghost, grunted in acknowledgement. I've seen her sketching, sitting by the window now. Nothing else? No deliveries? Nope. But someone was watching her window last night. From across the street. Tall guy, dark coat. Could have been Jonah. Did you get a plate? Too far for a clean read, but I got the car make. Hyundai Sonata, late model, New Jersey tags. Keep an eye out. If he moves again, follow him. I hung up and turned back to Wolfe. She's playing a dangerous game. She is, but she's not playing alone anymore. Now we are watching too. Around noon, a messenger arrived at the brownstone. Thin kid in a grey cap held out a stiff white envelope with Wolfe's name scrawled in a neat, controlled script. No return address. Fritz brought it up on a tray as if it were a souffle. Wolfe opened it carefully, extracting a single piece of cream paper. On it, a drawing, a knife, simple, elegant, rendered in black ink and blood-red watercolor. The blade dripped crimson. Beneath it, one word. Remember. I leaned over Wolfe's shoulder. From Kendra. Almost certainly. You think she sent a copy to Jonah? Wolfe stared at the image, his eyes narrowing. If she did not, she meant for us to show it to him. That's not a message. That's a dare. He didn't answer. He simply reached for the phone and called Saul. Intervene, he said. Subtly. I want to know where Jonah Fell goes tonight. If he follows Miss Hale, or approaches her, we must be in position. Copy that, Saul said. I'll put a second tail on him. Jonah didn't go home that night either. Instead, he met with Dahlia Trent again, this time not at a wine bar, but at her apartment. Saul trailed him from the restaurant to the building, confirmed his entry at 8:14 p.m., and waited. An hour passed, then 2. At 10:47, he left alone. By 11:30, he was parked in front of Kendra's building. I met Saul at the corner. He's just sitting there, I asked. Lights off, engine running, watching the window. He knows she sent us the sketch. Unlikely. Then he thinks she's escalating, which means he's deciding whether to silence her or scare her back into hiding. Saul grunted. You want to knock on his window? Tempting, I said. But Wolfe doesn't want interference yet. He wants to observe. Just then, the door to Kendra's building opened. She stepped out, no coat, just a dark sweater and jeans. She looked straight at Jonah's car and didn't flinch. Then she walked down the sidewalk, directly toward him. Hell, I muttered, reaching for my phone. Wolfe answered on the second ring. She's approaching him, I said. No hesitation. Wolfe's voice was cool and even. Let it proceed. Stay close. I pocketed the phone and moved down the block behind parked cars. Saul mirrored me from across the street. Kendra stopped at Jonah's driver's side window. He rolled it down. They spoke for exactly 1 minute. Then she handed him something. An envelope. She turned and walked back inside. Jonah stared at the envelope for several seconds before opening it. Then, slowly, he started the car and drove off. Saul followed. I stayed behind. Back at the brownstone the next morning, Wolfe was in no mood for delay. I gave him a full report, including the handoff and Saul's tale. Jonah had driven to the waterfront in Red Hook, parked behind an abandoned bakery, and sat there for 20 minutes before returning to Manhattan. No stops, no phone calls, just silence. His silence is telling, Wolfe said. He received a second message, one that matters. I nodded. Want me to ask Kendra what was in the envelope? No need, Wolfe said. She told us already. He slid the original sketch across the desk. She sent him the same image. Perhaps drawn slightly differently, perhaps a new word beneath. But the intent is identical. Why the bakery? I asked. To think, to panic, to rehearse a lie. And now? Now we bring them in. Wolfe made the calls personally. Victor Lattanzio, Dahlia Trent Jonah Fell, Kendra Hale, Reggie Corso. One by one he summoned them with the unspoken implication that refusal wasn't an option. At 5 o'clock sharp, they arrived. Wolfe had them seated in his office, Kendra and Reggie on the sofa, Dahlia and Jonah on the red chairs, Lattanzio near the window, his arms crossed. Wolfe waited until the silence grew uncomfortable, then spoke. We are here, he said, because a line was crossed. He let that hang in the air. A member of your team, he continued, was driven to orchestrate a deception so elaborate it risked her job, her reputation, and possibly her freedom. She did this not out of whimsy, but desperation, because she believed her safety was imperiled. Jonah stirred. You're talking about Kendra. Yes, Wolfe said. I am. She's unstable. She's courageous, Wolfe said, cutting him off, because she did what you could not. She exposed a sickness. Jonah's jaw tightened. You have no proof. I have patterns, Wolfe snapped. Subtle dominance, verbal manipulation, proximity used as threat, intimidation disguised as instruction, and now an envelope, 2 envelopes, sent not to threaten you, but to reveal you. He turned to Dahlia. You enabled him, out of loyalty, or fear, or ambition. Dahlia said nothing. To Reggie, thank you for your quiet aid. To Victor Lattanzio, your kitchen was violated. Not by violence, but by silence. Then to Kendra, you made yourself heard. That is not a sin. It is a reckoning. Jonah stood. You have no legal basis to... Sit down, Wolfe said. And he did. Wolfe gestured. Mr. Lattanzio, the decision is now yours. Mr. Fell must be dismissed. Quietly. Permanently. If you do not act, I will. Victor stood slowly, looked at Jonah, then at Kendra. Then he nodded. It's done. Jonah didn't speak. He walked out without a word. The others followed, murmuring. Only Kendra lingered. Thank you, she said softly. Wolfe inclined his head. Do not draw blood again unless it is real. She gave a sad smile. I hope I never have to. And then she, too, was gone. I looked at Wolfe. You sure he won't retaliate? No, Wolfe said. But he's lost the thing he needs most. Control. He won't come back. Not now. And the sketch? Wolfe tapped the corner of the page. A message and a mirror. What do we do with it? He folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer. We remember. Dinner was served an hour later. Braised duck, no blood. Just justice and a splash of burgundy. Fritz's braised duck had cooled to the perfect degree by the time Wolfe and I took our seats at the dining room table. He did not comment on the silence that had taken over the brownstone since the office gathering. He rarely does. But I could tell by the unhurried way he carved into the duck breast and dabbed at the sauce with a finger of rye that his appetite was restored. Mine, not so much. Don't get me wrong, I'm not one to let a good meal suffer for bad memories, but something about Kendra's voice when she said, "Thank you," had stuck with me. Gratitude is common in our line of work. Relief, too. But there was something raw in her tone. Not victory, not satisfaction, just survival. Wolfe noticed, of course. He never misses when I'm chewing a bite for longer than it deserves. You're ruminating, he said, not looking up from his plate. I'm digesting, I countered. You're brooding. That's not digestion. That's protest. I set down my fork. It was a clean ending. Quiet, effective, but it didn't feel like a win. No, he said, because it wasn't. That took me off guard. You saying we lost? No, Mr. Goodwin. I'm saying we intervened. The loss had already occurred. Long before Miss Hale's desperation drove her to stage a threat. Long before Mr. Fell decided that power in silence is more effective than cruelty in plain sight. What we did was staunch the bleeding, but the wound is still there. I stared at him. You're in a mood. He raised a brow. Reality offends you? No, just surprises me. You don't usually go in for metaphor. He took a sip of beer. Today, perhaps, it fits. The apron was metaphor. Blood where there was none. Pain made visible. And that, I suppose, demands response in kind. We ate in silence for a while. The meal was perfect, but my thoughts were miles away. On Jonah, and whether he was really finished. On Kendra, and how long it would take for her hands to stop shaking. And on Reggie, who'd stepped into danger without being asked, and had no idea how close he came to becoming collateral damage. Wolfe cleared his throat. You believe he'll return? I looked up. Jonah. Number, I think he's smart enough to recognize a broken spell. Kendra found her voice. He can't work in an environment where he's being watched. He'll find another, Wolfe said. Somewhere with less scrutiny. Fewer eyes. Should we warn someone? Would they listen? Wolfe asked. We live in a society that listens to results, not warnings. And men like Jonah, clever, self-contained, don't leave fingerprints. Except on psyches. Wolfe grimaced. Spare me. Sorry, you started it. After dinner, we returned to the office. Wolfe poured a second glass of beer, not his usual habit, and picked up the folded drawing Kendra had sent. The blood-red knife, dripping across the page, still looked vivid. Angry. Why did she send it to us? I asked. She already knew she had our attention. Wolfe tapped the image. Because she wanted us to understand. She had no evidence, no recorded threats, no physical bruises. Only fear, and that is rarely persuasive. She made it persuasive. She made it visible, Wolfe corrected. She told her story in blood, even if it was borrowed. That, Mr. Goodwin, is a kind of genius. Dangerous, but potent. I sat on the edge of the desk. You think she's all right now? Number, but she will be. Reggie's still checking in on her. Yes, a small mercy. We sat for a moment in the kind of silence that only comes at the end of a case. The heavy kind. Not triumphant, but settled. Eventually, Wolfe said, Do you know why I took the case? I looked at him. You said you didn't. I didn't at first. But once the apron was here, on my desk, I knew. The object was theatrical, but the method, too precise, too intentional. It had design. And where there is design, there is thought. And where there is thought, there is motive. And you love motive. Indeed. He looked at the orchid near the window, one pale bloom beginning to wilt. Miss Hale understood something elemental. The only way to make people act is to make them feel. And what she lacked in power, she compensated for in symbolism. You almost sound impressed. I am. But I am also alarmed. Because she had to resort to deception to be believed. That landed heavy. Yeah, I said quietly. That part got to me too. He reached into the drawer and withdrew a fresh file folder. Blank. Labeled only APR 242- The Apron with a blood stain. He slipped the drawing inside and closed it. Let the record reflect, he said, that this case was not about a crime, but about the anticipation of one. And that may be harder to solve than any murder. Would you take it again? He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, yes. But I would charge more. I smiled. You didn't charge anything. He shrugged. That was for Silvio Lattanzio's sake. A favor once rendered demands an answer eventually. This was mine. You think Victor will come back with another mess someday? Number. He has learned his lesson. He will watch his kitchen more carefully now. And the next Jonah. There is always another Jonah, Wolfe said, but not always another Kendra. I let that sit for a while. You're sure she won't pull another stunt? She's made her point, and more importantly, she knows she was heard. That may be enough. The orchid's wilted bloom drooped slightly farther. Wolfe noticed. He stood slowly and moved toward it, lifting the stem with the care of a surgeon. A small snip with his shears, and the dead bloom fell away. He dropped it into the waste bin. Sometimes, he said, one must prune in order to preserve. I nodded. Poetic? No, Wolfe said, returning to his chair. Just botanical. I got up and crossed to the door. As I stepped out, I said over my shoulder, "You know, for a man who never leaves his house, you do a remarkable job keeping people safe." He grunted. Not people. Order. Fair enough. The brownstone fell quiet again. Outside, the city pulsed with the usual evening chaos. Cabs honking, radios leaking jazz and sports. Scores. Somewhere, someone was telling a lie. Somewhere else, someone was finally telling the truth. Inside, Nero Wolfe poured the last inch of beer, sighed and muttered, "There is nothing more human than a threat delivered in metaphor." Then he reached for the Oxford Companion to Orchids, opened it, and let the world turn without him for the night. Case closed. But the bloodstain remained. The next morning, I thought we were done. We'd closed the book, filed it, indexed it, and metaphorically shelved it somewhere between unusual domestic tactics and non-lethal crimes committed with flair. Wolfe had even declared a moratorium on visitors for 48 hours, which in his world meant absolute silence, uninterrupted beer, and a strict prohibition on human folly. So when the doorbell rang at 9:43 a.m., I was already annoyed. I answered it with the kind of professional smile I reserve for persistent meter readers and unannounced relatives. It disappeared when I saw who was standing on the steps. Dahlia Trent. She looked different, not in the way people do when they've had a good cry, but like someone who'd been turned inside out and pressed back into shape. Her white chef's coat was gone, replaced by a black turtleneck and jeans, and her hair was pinned in a way that said, "I don't need to impress anyone, least of all you." "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe." "About what?" "I think you'll want to hear it." That's rarely a good sign. I brought her upstairs. Wolfe didn't look up from the book he was reading, a leather-bound volume on food chemistry written by someone who probably hadn't eaten a hot meal since 1972. "Miss Trent," he said without inflection. "Unexpected." "I know," she replied, "but I have information and a question." He closed the book. "Proceed." She didn't sit. That was interesting. "I lied," she said. "Which instance?" Wolfe asked dryly. "Fair enough," she said. "Specifically, I lied when I said I didn't know about the second envelope. The one Kendra gave to Jonah." Wolfe's eyes lifted. "You saw it?" "I made it." I blinked. "Excuse me." She came to me the night before, asked for help. She wanted to send him a message that would shake him, not just as a warning, but as a mirror. Said he needed to see what he'd done. "So you collaborated," Wolfe said. "Yes. I drew the image. She wrote the word. We sealed it. She delivered it. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't," Wolfe said. Dahlia nodded. "Number Jonah called me afterward. Said he understood now. Said he wouldn't retaliate. That he was leaving. I thought it was over. But last night," she said, "he called again. Different tone. Cold. He said someone had taken something from his station, a recipe book, his personal notes. Was it you? I asked. Number, but I think Kendra took it. Wolfe's brows furrowed. Why would she do that? Because it's not just recipes, Dahlia said. He keeps records, names, comments, little things. He logs people. I saw it once. He writes down when people come in late, when they make mistakes, even things they say. It's all there. Pages of it. A ledger of leverage, Wolfe murmured. Yes, she said. If Kendra has it, she has insurance. But if he knows she has it, she's in danger, I finished. Wolfe leaned back. Why come to me? Because if I go to Lattanzio, he'll bury it. And if I go to Kendra, she might panic. But you already know what he is. You'll handle it. Wolfe considered that. Then, where is Mr. Fell now? I don't know. He said he was staying in a short-term rental while he looked for a new position. He didn't say where. I looked at Wolfe. Want me to ask Kendra? He nodded. Discreetly. Do not alarm her. Dahlia finally sat. I didn't come forward before because I didn't want to be part of it. I didn't want to admit I'd looked the other way for so long. You were complicit, Wolfe said. She didn't flinch. I know. That does not absolve you. I'm not asking for absolution, just protection for her, and frankly for me. I left to call Kendra. She answered on the second ring, voice wary. Hello? It's Archie. I need to ask you something directly. Did you take Jonah's recipe journal? Silence. Then, yes. Why? Because I knew he'd come after me if he thought I had proof. I thought if I had it first, I could keep him away. Where is it now? I locked it in a safety deposit box. Midtown. My name's on the lease, but nobody else knows it. Does he know you have it? I didn't think so. But maybe he figured it out. All right. Sit tight. Don't talk to him. Don't open the door. I'll be by later. She agreed, and I hung up. Back in the office, I said, She has it. Stashed away. Wolfe nodded once. Then we act. He made another call, this time to Saul. I want you on Jonah, Wolfe said. He's been spooked. He'll move. Watch him, and when he makes contact, intervene. What about the book? I asked. Retrieve it with Miss Hale's consent. Why? Because leverage left in play invites retaliation, and because I want to see what kind of man needs to write down fear in cursive. I left immediately. Kendra met me in front of the bank, pale but composed. She had the key in her hand and the steel calm of someone who decided not to run. Inside, we signed the forms, entered the vault, and she pulled the slim black notebook from box 113. Don't read it here, she said. Just take it. Back in the car, I opened it. Wolfe had been right. It wasn't just recipes. Each entry was dated. Noted. Precise. He'd logged every misstep, every comment, every perceived slight. Kendra's name appeared 24 times. Notes about her mannerisms, the way she held a spatula, a line she once said about feeling unsafe, marked with a red X. The book wasn't leverage. It was a manual, for pressure, for control. I returned to the brownstone and handed it to Wolfe. He skimmed it silently. Then he closed it. Have Mr. Fell brought in, he said. Saul arrived with Jonah an hour later. The man looked tired, rumpled, but still alert. Wolfe gestured to the chair. Jonah sat. This, Wolfe said, tapping the black book, is thorough. Jonah said nothing. You wrote everything, names, mistakes, phrases, postures. Still nothing. You believe control is a kind of insurance. Jonah finally spoke. You took it? No, Wolfe said. Miss Hale did. To protect herself, and now we have it. To end this. What do you want? Jonah asked. Nothing, Wolfe said. You will leave New York. You will not contact Kendra Hale again. You will not attempt to retrieve this journal, or copies of it. If you do, you will be exposed. You can't. I can, Wolfe said. I will. Jonah stood slowly. Fine. But you should know. I didn't need the journal. I remember everything. Wolfe nodded. Then I suggest you forget. Jonah left. This time I believed it would be for good. That night, Wolfe burned the journal in the fireplace. It caught quickly, pages of spite curling into ash. We watched until the last ember died. You okay with that? I asked. It served its purpose, he said. Now it serves a different one. And Kendra? She's safe. Really safe. He looked at the fire. As safe as anyone ever is. When the danger isn't fists, but memory. And with that, he returned to his chair. The brownstone fell silent once again. But for the first time in days, it didn't feel like a silence made of tension. It felt like peace. By the following morning, the air in the brownstone had changed. Not literally. Fritz still kept it at a temperature fit for orchids and oversized detectives. But figuratively, the tension had evaporated. There were no more messages in blood, no more stakeouts, no more conversations conducted like tiptoeing across broken glass. Just breakfast. Soft-boiled eggs, toasted rye, a small dish of quince jam, and silence so complete I could almost hear Wolfe's chewing. I take it, I said, buttering my toast, that we're officially off the clock. Wolfe grunted. I'm trying to decide if that's a yes or indigestion. He dabbed his mouth with a napkin. It is a confirmation, Mr. Goodwin. We are no longer entangled. I nodded. And the matter of the journal? Destroyed, as it should be. Its existence was a liability. And the people in it? Wolfe paused, then said, warned. I was halfway through my coffee when the phone rang. Fritz picked it up the hall, murmured into it for a moment, and then poked his head in like someone preparing to announce the apocalypse. It is Miss Hale, he said. Wolfe looked up. Put her through. Fritz disappeared. A moment later, the office line rang. I picked it up. Archie Goodwin. Mr. Goodwin, is Mr. Wolfe there? He is. You sound calm. I am. For the first time in weeks, I just wanted to say thank you. To both of you. Wolfe, hearing this, reached out and took the receiver from me with a surprising lack of ceremony. Miss Hale, he said, you are welcome. I know you didn't have to take my case. I didn't, he said. She hesitated. But you did. Yes, Wolfe said simply, because someone needed to intervene before the next act of desperation. I was ready to do something stupid, she admitted. Many intelligent people have done so when trapped. I thought I had to choose between being safe and being silent. And now, I'm neither, yet. But I'm no longer alone. Wolfe nodded, though she couldn't see it. Good. That is sufficient. For now. Goodbye, Mr. Wolfe. He returned the receiver to its cradle and said nothing. I gave him a long look. Well? She's resigned, Wolfe said. What? She has stepped away from Latanzio, unofficially, temporarily. She told you that. She didn't need to. Her tone was final. But she was safe there. No, Wolfe said. She was surviving. There's a difference. I leaned back in my chair. So now what? She becomes a freelance pastry savant. She will do what all survivors do, Wolfe said. Rebuild. Choose again, and this time on her terms. That was when the doorbell rang. Again. I sighed. Tell me it's not another bloodstained delivery. It wasn't. It was Reggie Corso. He looked like someone had ironed him flat, folded him twice, and stuffed him into a messenger bag. His clothes were neat, but he had the haunted look of a man who'd finally sat down after standing guard for weeks. I don't want to bother you, he said as I opened the door. Then don't, I said cheerfully. "But come in anyway." Wolfe was less welcoming. "Mr. Corso, you're not expected." "I know, I needed to talk." He took the red chair, wringing his hands like he wanted to bake something out of them. "I'm staying on at the restaurant," he said. "Victor offered me a more permanent position. Back of house, some logistics, light prep. He said I showed integrity under pressure." "That is accurate," Wolfe said. "But I feel like I walked out of a fire, and now I'm supposed to keep working next to the ashes." "No one expects that of you," Wolfe said. "I do," Reggie replied. "Because if I leave now, Jonah wins, even if he's gone." Wolfe regarded him. "That is a commendable sentiment. But staying for revenge is nobler than leaving out of fear." "It's not revenge," Reggie said. "It's memory." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Reggie straightened his spine. "I was there. I saw what was done, and not done. I'll be damned if I let that kitchen forget." There was a pause. Then Wolfe said, "Very well. Then remember. But do so with purpose." Reggie looked at him, a little stunned. "Thank you." He left shortly after, a little taller. When the door shut, I looked at Wolfe. "Soft spot for kitchen boys now?" "Number, but resolve deserves acknowledgement." "You think he'll make it?" "Yes," Wolfe said, "because he understands the difference between staying silent and standing witness." Later that afternoon, Wolfe let me sit in the office without speaking. We don't always get to do that, especially not after a case. There's usually filing, calling, more calling, and trying to get Saul paid. But this time, there was just space. "I wonder," I said eventually, "what would have happened if Kendra hadn't sent that apron?" Wolfe didn't look up from his book. She would have quit, quietly. Her absence would have been noted briefly, then forgotten. Mr. Fell would have remained. Another name would be logged in that journal. Another posture, another perceived slight. And eventually someone would have done something worse. I nodded. So she changed the story. "She interrupted it," Wolfe said. "A small difference, but a vital one. I don't know what I'd have done in her place. You are not her. You are equipped with other tools, other reflexes." "Like sarcasm?" Wolfe grunted. "Precisely." The doorbell didn't ring again that day. No calls came through, no sketches, no silence that felt like a scream. Just the brownstone, orchids upstairs, beer on tap, a single blood-stained apron now sealed in a file folder and tucked away in the cabinets of the unspoken. Another case closed. And as I poured myself a second coffee and reached for the paper, Wolfe muttered, almost to himself, "Justice is not always loud. But it is always deliberate." That was about as close to sentimental as he ever got. And I didn't argue with it, because for once, we hadn't caught a killer. We'd caught a slow rot before it turned into a body, which, when you think about it, is a pretty good day's work, especially in a world where blood doesn't always mean murder, and silence can be just as deadly. It was 3 days later when the last thread unraveled. Not violently, not loudly, but with the faint whisper of a ribbon loosening from a gift no one asked for. We were at the tail end of a quiet lunch. Fritz had prepared a mushroom risotto with a poached duck egg Wolfe had insisted on overseeing personally when the mail arrived. It included a plain envelope addressed in sharp, elegant script to Mr. Nero Wolfe. No return address, no postage, hand-delivered. Wolfe frowned at the intrusion. "You vetted this?" he asked Fritz. "Thoroughly," Fritz said. "It was slid under the door." That earned a glance from me. "Someone's feeling dramatic," I said. Wolfe opened the envelope and extracted a single sheet of notepaper. I leaned in. There were only 3 lines, written in that same clinical hand. "I have gone." She was right to fear me, but she was wrong to think fear would change me. No signature. No name. Just the silence of someone leaving a confession behind like a calling card. "Jonah," I said. "Undoubtedly," Wolfe murmured. He read it again, not to be sure, but to take the measure of the man. "That's not remorse," I said. "No," Wolfe agreed. "That's declaration. He still thinks he's the smartest man in the room." "He is not," Wolfe said. "But he is the most dangerous kind, the one who believes his logic entitles him to dominion." "So what do we do with this?" Wolfe considered the paper for a moment. Then, without ceremony, he tore it in half and placed it in the fire. "We acknowledge it, then we deny it permanence." The flames caught quickly. "Nothing actionable," I said. "Just more words." "Words can wound," Wolfe said, "but only when preserved." He stood, a rare event in itself, and crossed to the window. The orchids were blooming in full. Spring had begun in earnest. He inspected a blossom, then turned. Miss Hale acted without proof, without protection, without power, and still managed to expose a rot beneath a polished surface. That is intellect, not his. "Kendra's." "Yes," Wolfe said. There was a knock at the door. Fritz answered it. It was Victor Lattanzio. He didn't step inside, just passed Fritz a box, nodded once, and left. Fritz brought it into the office. From Mr. Lattanzio, I opened it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a fresh chef's apron. Clean, white, crisp, a card was folded on top. I read it aloud. For Mr. Wolfe. With gratitude for saving what we did not know was at risk. No blood this time. Only thanks. Wolfe didn't smile, but he did allow the card to remain on the desk. "That," he said, "is the correct ending." I nodded. Symbolism reversed. "Order restored," he corrected. And with that, he returned to his chair. The orchids glowed quietly in the afternoon light. Fritz resumed his duties, and I, Archie Goodwin, filed the final notes on a case that began with a stain and ended with a warning. No corpses, no arrests, but justice in the slow, precise, and deliberate fashion Nero Wolfe prefers. Not by force, but by knowledge. And sometimes that's the only thing sharper than a blade, 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 sharper than a blade.